Oh, all right. Okay, so for my project, it's titled Artificial Intelligence, Authentic Change, and I wanted to focus on the role of AI in developing countries. Before I start this, the topic of developing countries is sometimes a little bit of a touchier subject for some people. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, every single community and every single population has a different sets of needs and things that they're missing. So I'm not trying to come up here and say that I have a one size fits all, give them this and this, and then everything will be fine and everything is solved in the world. These are just some of the things that could in the future potentially be used to help them. So developing nation. So a developing nation is defined primarily off of GDP. So that's how much money they're profiting, how much money is coming into the community every year as a result of exports and other profits. Some of the things right now that are taking priority in these nations are some like super strenuous and labor intensive tasks, things like finding food, finding water, not becoming ill from said food and water, getting to and from work if you have a job, if not, then trying to find a job, hygienic needs, sanitation, sewage, disposal, these kinds of things. And it's just a big giant pile of things that these people in these communities have to deal with that, we don't even really think about per se on a daily basis. And another thing that is in these developing countries is there's a huge technology gap. So it's almost as if there's two different worlds. If you look at Canada and the US on this graph, they're in like the 50 to 100% basically of computers per 100 people. And then if you go over into some other nations, and it's not exclusively Africa. I mean, there's Asia, there's South America, all around the world, there's countries where there's 0 to 5 computers per 100 people. So that's, if one family has 2 computers, then that's half of it right there per 100 people. So, and the big problem with this is that Moore's law, if you take that into consideration, for every year and every 2 years that there's no advancement because there's nothing to advance from, we still are advancing. So the gap is exponentially growing every minute, every time that there's a new technological advancement in the developed world. And so some of the reasons for technology gaps, so lack of money, unfortunately, lack of resources. So that could be things like the satellite network, the information, the books, the everything. Lack of post-secondary. A lot of times people are first exposed to these new technologies in post-secondary, such as us, for example. And so if you don't go to post-secondary, there might not be a reason for you to be using these advanced technologies that you can at least, in your life see. Lack of internet satellite connection. So, you can have a computer. If you don't have internet, there's not much you can do with it. Lack of time and lack of energy. I think these are the most important things, because as long as your main focus is, I need to get water, I need to get food, and these things take hours and hours of your day, you don't have the time or the energy to worry about, when am I going to get this computer? When am I going to get AI? What you're worried about is, when am I going to get the food so that I can survive another day? And so it is super important to try and close this gap as soon as possible, partly because of how I mentioned the Moore's law. Another thing is that these nations, once this gap is closed, there's going to be new, never thought of advancements that might take them far beyond us, that they just can't produce right now because they don't have the resources available to them. And so unfortunately, like I said, money is the biggest obstacle, but there's some good news because we can use the AI that we already have to help close the gap. So the next step is to introduce this computerized and machine technology to help make these advancements. But I mean, most of us can't afford these high-tech AI things in a developed world. So how is a developing country supposed to afford it, right? It's a big barrier. Well, I'd like to introduce you to some of these beautiful people up on the screen right now. And, the interesting thing about this is that these people are, some of them like Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Zuckerberg and these Bezos, they're on the front lines of these new developments in the AI and all of these advancements. right? But I mean, the way you get rich is you don't give people things for free. So how can we maybe try and convince them to donate? Because for them, it's not even a matter of I'm going to buy this AI and then give it. It's just I'm not going to profit off of my sales. I'm just going to supply it, right? So how do we convince them to do that? Well, there was a paper that was published about how AI can make people like better citizens. And so in this experiment, basically what happened is they took people who owned like slaughterhouses and like they were like cattle ranchers, and they put them in a VR headset, and they made them get on all fours, and they made them, climb around or whatever. And basically then, so they were just grazing, hanging out with their cow friends. And then all of a sudden there was like tactile feedback on the ground, and they got into this dark truck, and then the truck was like vibrating and whatever. And then they got taken in like a little convoy into the slaughterhouse and watched all their cow besties get murdered. And then they themselves got murdered. And then after that, they're like, so how do you feel about your job? And half of them became vegetarians. So that was the study on that. And it was about how we can be more empathetic towards like experiences that we've never really had and we can't feel. So I bet you if you put Elon Musk in a simulator where he has to walk, say, 10 miles to go get water, only to get it and then find out he has hepatitis A from it, then can't get to a hospital. And even if he could, there's no doctors to help him. I bet you that he would be a lot less hesitant towards giving people the technology that they need. So now we have this technology in these countries. So how can we use it? There's things that we have today that we've had for decades that could help, things like, water filters, mosquito nets, things like this. But that's not what really this course is about, and that's not what we're really talking about. So what does the future hold? Well, it can be things as simple as, say, an iPhone or some sort of AI, like machine learned. It doesn't have to be like a big machine. It can just be something in your pocket that tells you, or you have like a little probe, say, or something, and it tells you, is this water safe? Can I drink it? Will I get sick from this water or from this food? If it's, you're thinking about, you're trying to decide when you can harvest your crops, is there going to be a storm tomorrow? Should I harvest my crops today before a monsoon comes through and floods everything? Where should I plant my crops? What crops should I plant? How is the weather going to be this season to maximize my yield? So it can just be like an artificial intelligence, like programmed machine that can give you these answers that you can't inherently get, no matter what kind of experience and what life wisdom you have, really. So it can start from there. It can be that simple. After that, I mean, Elon Musk is already talking about Tesla bots. We're not quite there yet, but there's already talks of it. Well, what if you took these humanoid robots and you said, okay, go build me the school. I don't have time. I don't have energy. Build the school for me, or go pave the road for me. Connect me to a metropolitan area where I can then get healthcare or where I can then get resources. Or you can send it, if you want to build a school and you want to pave the road, go bring me the water. You go walk the 10 miles for me. You go collect my food for me. The last 2 points, in some of these countries, it's not a dispositional quality, it's situational, right? When you have nothing and your neighbor has a little bit of something, you're more likely to take their little bit of something to provide for yourself. So watch my house, defend for me. Now, the person who has a little bit of something doesn't have to stay at home all day to watch their little bit of something. They can go and do whatever they need to do. They can go attend school. With all these things being done by humanoid robots, it kind of solves like the biggest problem that I mentioned earlier about not having the time or the energy. Next, going a little bit even further into the future, cybernetics. Now imagine if you don't have to have food and you don't really need that much water. You can plug yourself in whenever you get low on energy. That eliminates the disease, the time spent digesting, eating, finding, the risks, some of like maybe the battles of who gets the food. And you can make people stronger, faster, smarter. So if you do still have to walk to the water, you can bring back 40 liters instead of 5. And you can reach metropolitan areas more quickly. So there's so many opportunities and options that you can do with these. And the bolded question at the end is the altered social structure. This is one of the things that you have to kind of consider, is that, is it enough to give a community, say, make two people cyborgs and make them, the designated, you're going to go get water because you can carry so much? Or is it going to start being like I have these cybernetic capabilities and you don't, and now I'm superior to you, and now I'm going to use this against like the goodwill, right? So that's something that adds just a little bit of complication to that. Is can we reliably give just a few people this and trust them to use it to help their community? Or does this have to be something that, every single person has to get? And I just realized that my camera's turned off. There we go. Okay. So next, I wanted to talk a little bit about how this can apply to medicine. Something that is super, important is that in these countries and in these communities where we don't have resources or we don't have many resources, one of the biggest and most important things is to maximize the things we do have, not to waste and not to kind of go through and trial and error. Those kinds of methods in medicine can be super wasteful with super expensive and super hard to access things. So it's super important to maximize what you do have. So precision medicine, now we kind of talked about those a couple lectures ago, those like embedded chips that can track the medicine, whatever. So if you had one of those, that AI chip can tell you right away, oh, hey, listen, this medicine's not working. Oh, hey, listen, this dosage is too high. You could save some medicine by lowering it. Or this recovery could be faster if you did it like this. So that could help tailor it to the patient, minimize the amount of resources used, and maximize the efficacy. Another thing to consider is that in these nations, people often don't have much access to hospitals. They can't get there often, and doctors are kind of sometimes far and wide. So if instead of this trial and error where you have to go back and forth to the clinic every month for a year by the time you figure out your medicine, it can be done once and for all. And I put in the first point, which I think is most important, is that it's best if, and this is also kind of from a couple lectures ago, where, alternative medicine is the main medicine in a lot of non-Westernized countries. And so the best way to, use precision medicine, I believe, in developing nations is a mix of the spiritual healing, the religious healing, the, mental health aspect of it, and your physical health, because that is a part of healing. For you to be considered healed, I do believe that you need to be healed in all aspects and not just in the one. So that's why I think that that's super important to incorporate that into precision medicine is, what spirituality are they? What do they believe in will help them? What do they feel comfortable with receiving? To what limit, to what extent? And all of that taken into consideration. Next is regenerative medicine. So this was actually super cool. It was a study done, and basically Dr. Greenwood, she put together a panel of doctors, and they identified like a list of top 10. They kind of voted and like used the method of elimination to see the top 10 uses of AI or regenerative medicine, in the developing world. And so there's some really cool things on there, like the insulin replacement, pancreatic islet cell transplants. I found the islet cell transplant super cool, and then I thought that this one, point number 5, the biocompatible blood substitutes, I think that would also be a super important thing, considering like places like Africa where sickle cell anemia is a lot more common than it is here, as well as because of the increased diseases and infections that are in a lot of the developing nations. Blood transfusions are kind of far and wide. They're kind of scarce. It's not as popular, right? No one's running out to go donate blood when they have to worry about how am I going to survive the next week. So if we had some sort of synthetic blood, this would allow for a lot more surgeries, a lot more procedures, and just release a lot of strain. And the same thing, this kind of goes back to the maximizing the resources that you have. For example, with the insulin replacement, for people in these countries, if they're diabetic, for them to go to the hospital every month, get their checkup, check their insulin, get a new dose of insulin, get their tracker, get the measuring sticks for that, use the logbook, keep up with it, have access to these resources in case their blood sugar suddenly drops. It's a lot and it can get really expensive. So instead of, doing this for a lifetime where you have to figure out how you're going to communicate with the doctor every month when you can barely get out of your village. What if you just got this islet cell transplant one time and then all of a sudden you're good for the rest of your life, right? So it's more costly up front, but in the long run, it makes it easier for everyone. If instead of, treating, but still having a disorder, if we can just change it out altogether. And so, artificial organs and organelles, they're not here yet, but we know that they're going to be important and that they're going to be very impactful. But there's that societal challenge that I kind of alluded to earlier is we have to make sure that these developing nations and countries trust us. We can't just impose upon them like, no, listen, you're going to have this artificial organ put inside you because we think it's going to work, and you're going to do it whether or not because we're helping you. Doesn't matter whether you want it or not. And like another thing to take into consideration is, a lot of people in these least developed countries, they've never maybe been to a hospital. So like for us, this looks like a standard operating room. Like it does look flashy and like they have a lot of technology in there, but it's nothing that's like, oh, so like chaotically wild and out of what we would expect to see. But for someone who's never even stepped inside of a hospital, if you showed them this picture, they would kind of be overwhelmed and like, what is all this technology? Like none of that is coming near me, get away from me. So for us to then say, okay, but we're going to actually put a 3D printed, made out of nothing plastic heart inside of you, right? So that's, I think, another reason why we have to make sure that this is mutually done in a way that is mutually beneficial and a positive experience for both sides, and not just something that we're imposing and something that we are forcing. And that's one of the other big challenges. So some take-home messages to kind of end the presentation. I think it's super important to realize that communities must be healthy and have their essentials for survival before they can focus on enhancement. And this is something that, I think this is one of the big reasons why it's important to use AI in these countries, is because they wouldn't be using it for enhancement, they would be using it for survival, right? Like we don't need AI to keep living. We're using it to make things more convenient for us, unless we're talking about regenerative medicine, in which case it is about living. But a lot of like just the straight technological AI is just more so for our convenience, for enhancement, doing things that we couldn't do before, but it wouldn't really affect our survival. And, in these communities, I think we have to start with the medical aspect of it, and the rest will kind of just follow after that a little bit easier. Because once everyone is healthy and happy, then they can start putting their attention and their energy elsewhere. The second thing, so change can be made with the artificial intelligence that already exists today. We can use AI, we can set up an algorithm saying, okay, evaluate this area and tell us what it needs. Tell us exactly, like forecast it for what's going to happen. Let us help them prepare. Let them prepare, right? Emerging and conceptual technologies can make a positive impact. So that's all the AIs like the Siri and those kinds of the humanoid robots. And I think another important thing to mention here, something that Dr. Swills actually talked to me about this morning, is that, in these countries, what we're going to see is a lot of like leapfrogging of technology. It's not going to be like, for example, a phone. We're not going to start off with, okay, here's a landline, and okay, here's a Nokia. Okay, here's an iPhone 3, and then go through that. It's going to be straight from like nothing to iPhone 12, right? So it's not going to be, Moore's law. It's going to catch up. They're going to kind of do a different little curvy, and it's going to hop right over to where we are, right? We don't need them to go through all of the desktop computers and dial-in computers, right? So it's not like they're going to take another 200 years to catch up. Once everyone is healthy and they have access to these technologies, it's going to be a fast and rapid incline. And once that technology catches up, new innovations, once that might save us today, it might completely turn around. So once they have the technology, they could come up with things that we'll want. And in the future, we might be the developing nation because they're so far ahead of us. So it's an incentive for everyone to want to try and help these countries get to where they need to be or where they want to be, is that just because we haven't found the answer doesn't mean that there is no answer. The answer could lie in any one of those people who right now can't come up with it because they can't go to school, because they can't focus on it because they have to focus on food and health. And our biggest obstacle currently is money. So the take-home question really, and the ending is, what can we do to change that? And with that, I would like to thank you guys for your attention and ask if there were any questions.
So why don't you turn off your turn the system on here, and you want to turn on that mic? Yeah.
I've muted myself.
Okay.
I don't need the microphone directly in front of me, do I?
No, it works at considerable distance. Okay, are there questions? So, what do you see, if you think back to Taryn Stokowski's teaching session last Tuesday, where she's talking about Eastern culture and Western culture. Like if a person from a kind of holistic culture is kind of entering into a much more technological culture, you know, how do you kind of explain this transition to them? I mean, one way to think about it, I think, but see what you think, is kind of not teach them about Western culture because it's better or right, but just it's an option, right? They can sort of pick and choose from their own culture and from Western culture and see which they like better.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, like AI can help them. AI can help maybe detect, you know, oh, you didn't know this, but maybe this plant is good for helping with this, right? So it doesn't have to look like our models with how we are thinking of using precision. It could be something completely different.
Sure.
And, you know, we might find out that it is better than Western medicine, who knows? Right. It's just, I think with right now, the first step, I think it would be kind of like an invasion of Western medicine, because that's what we have realistically.
Right.
And then as it develops and as, you know, they start developing their own technologies, I think there's going to be an emergence of AI in alternative medicine and spiritual and holistic medicine.
Right. There are other interesting things that actually apply directly to this course. Like many of you, you know, your final papers due today, you sent me a draft. Let me tell you that in the past, the variation is complete from people. When I suggest a change in the draft, they make that change. You know, or they say, well, Dr. Solis, I understand what you're saying, but I'm not going to do that, you know? So like in you know, Eastern culture, you wouldn't ever do that. You would say, you know, respected sir, I'm not going to do what you said, you know? But still, it is an interesting spectrum, even amongst people taking this course, of how they react to my, you know, suggestions about the paper. Oh my God, if you suggested it, I'll certainly do it. It is the greatest suggestion ever. But I just want you to know that there have been instances now of very high performing students just no, you know, like this paper is now me. And if I do what you say, it won't be me anymore. You know, I don't want to do that. I want to keep it pure. Yeah. So I think that whole spectrum is valid, and anything we do to try to improve the lot of people in developing countries should not include some sort of idealized improvement that we think they should all undergo.
Yeah.
You know, the whole country needs some sort of upgrade. That isn't true. You know, there are people there whose lives are completely in balance, who are providing a lot of benefit to others and themselves. And, you know, they feel a sort of inner peace that is probably a lot better and greater than the inner peace that we feel, right? And so, you know, there's no valid plan to kind of change every single person in the country. That doesn't make any sense. I'm thinking of, like, you know, the best man at my wedding, who came from New York City, and I was from a very rural area. One of the funniest things was he comes in this small town in New York's Finger Lakes region, looks around, says, "This place needs development." You know? I think, well, yeah, or not. Maybe we're fine just the way we are, you know. So yeah. Yeah.
Hello? Oh,
Hello, sweet angel.
Yes.
oh no, sorry. I just have a question. If someone else wants to go first, that's good.
No, this is your time.
Okay, I'm on stage. Hell yeah. Okay.
You are.
So I just wanted to say, first of all, Imre, that was a very nice presentation. I loved it. Yay.
Thank you.
Also, I think I just wanted to make a comment of, like, I'm seeing already, like, so in the past, I would say that technologies that have been introduced by a lot of different communities have already been integrated into our, like, westernized society. So for example, like things like chocolate and coffee for some reason come into mind. Like,
Right.
people realized, oh, coffee, we can grind it, roast it, and drink it. Wow, great. And now it's like a huge part of our culture and, like, our society. Chocolate as well. People were like, oh, look at that bean. If we process that bean, oh, so tasty, yummy, yummy. And now, now when you look at countries like Korea, their entertainment industry has permeated ours, for example, with K-pop and, like, Squid Game and all of these, like, K-dramas and stuff. So I think what you're saying about introducing technologies and, like, seeing how, like, the culture itself takes it, makes it their own, and then just, like, spits out something else that we've never seen before is absolutely true. I'm excited to see it. That's it. Thank you. It wasn't a
Okay,
question. It was just a
cool.
comment.
All right, thank you. Okay, any other comments? All right. Well, we could go on then to Sean.
Oh, yeah, you just went to the washroom.
or yeah, we'll wait a few minutes. So any other questions, comments? Let me ask you, what are your thoughts about, like, the, you know, immediacy of the video? Like, when we get done today, I could post a video of all three presentations, you know, within an hour or so. It would take me a while, and it may not be ideal from your point of view to you know, like, do three separate videos and post them. What I'm thinking is, why don't I put up the one big video and you guys can look at it and then tell me the video of your presentation that's just you, what do you want it to be exactly? You know, like do you want it to be, well, let's take Chun's, for instance. Do you want me to fix it so that when you change from your own computer to, you know, my computer, that the audience doesn't see that. It's like it never happened. We take those instants in the universe and just throw them away, like, right? But maybe you'd want to see what it looks like first in the whole, connected video of all three. So I think that's what I'm going to try. That I'll post today the video of the whole thing. And then you can tell me if there are any fine points about what you want and don't want in the then edited video that is only you, that'll take, some days to create. So does that make sense? Does that work? Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. And now we'll go on to Sean. Sean, are you ready? So we'll turn off these microphones. You want to turn off that other one there?
Sorry, my laptop's camera is at a very weird angle, so I hope you enjoy looking at me from this angle.
Wow.
So my topic is actually quite tied to especially your last kind of point there, as well as yours, and it's kind of a philosophical discussion about thinking about how we think about the future. It's more or less, sorry. There we go. So to give us kind of a warm up to get our brains a little bit going, oh God, the singularity is coming. What's going to happen to humanity? What is humanity's future given this gargantuan explosion of intelligence? Well, that's a pretty easy answer, isn't it? It's pretty black and white. We got the good future and we have the bad future, right? And if we look at the good future, we can look in and we see, all right, humanity is good. It still exists. There's certainty. We have a certain future. We feel meaning. Life continues. And it's this nice utopia where everyone's equal and everything's amazing. And on the other end, if we look at the black end, the bad end, we see machines, which are evil. We see the ruin of humanity, dreadful uncertainty, meaninglessness. Life is over. And if life still exists, then it's this chaotic Darwinian world in which the self is greater than the other. And it looks pretty nice when we lay it out like this, right? However, I could just flip it and I could look at it from another perspective. I could say that humanity is evil, that certainty is boring, that meaning is a lie, that life is problematic, it breaks the entropy of the universe, and that I am definitely not equal to others. And on the other hand, machines are good. They are a replacement for humanity, which is evil. The ruin of humanity is deserved. The uncertainty is interesting. Meaninglessness is the truth. Death is an escape from the pains of life, and it is a fact that I am above others. But maybe it's just this duality that is terrible. It is a very inaccurate way of looking at things. But how about a spectrum? I think a spectrum is pretty nice. It's a nice visual metaphor. So let's label the axes. We have the non-human future and the human future, and a little bit in between. So what we'll do is we'll start with the non-human future. We'll take a look at that, and we'll slowly make our way to the human future and see what it looks like. Well, okay, we're in the non-human future. It's black, but why? Why shouldn't humanity have a future? Well, because this is humanity. Humanity has the capacity for great evil, and we inflict suffering upon one another, suffering upon other living beings, and suffering upon the environment at large. We are a destructive force, and we have done horrible evils. Perhaps that's why we shouldn't have a future. But if we do have a future, what purpose would it be for? Is there some underlying meaning that justifies all of this darkness, all of this grittiness, all of this evil? Well, if we ask famous mustachioed German existentialist philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, and we also ask Albert Camus and kind of Lao Tzu, he's small for a reason in this picture, and we ask them, is there an underlying meaning to existence, to my existence now? They would say intrinsically, for you, there is none. But really, it's up to you. It's up to you to define what your meaning is, because if you boil everything down rationally to its core, there is no inherent meaning. And that's a very sad and heavy thought. It's difficult to bear the idea that you have total agency over your meaning, total agency over your life, and total agency over the future and the direction of the future. It's so heavy a burden to bear that it's easy to take this agency and to give it to something else, something that's not human. Historically, we can understand this as humanity's relationship to spirituality. It's this desire to take what's human, this human agency and this human fate, and to put it into the hands of something else, whether it's God, a higher form of self that transcends you now. It's predicated on this idea of taking this human agency and giving it to the non-human. And this isn't just applicable to the spirituality. We can also understand it as humanity's relationship to our technology and the way that we view the singularity and visions for the future. It's this idea of we don't like this agency that we have. We don't like the idea of meaninglessness, so we transpose this meaning into our creations, and we dream that our creations will take over the burden from us, and that humanity won't be necessary in the future because humanity is irrelevant anyway. So why not dump off the responsibility of understanding existence to something that's non-human, that we can concretely say is non-human, whether it's God or our technologies? Why not? But wait, an important question arises. What even is human? It seems like an easy answer. So let's do a previous exercise that we've already done. Okay, so we have the human and the non-human, pretty simple, pretty concrete. And if we zoom in on the boundaries that distinguish them, we get a fractal. It's extremely complex, it's ununderstandable. And I know this is a very complicated visual metaphor, so I'll boil it down a little bit simpler. You can think about it as the attachment between parent and child. The child is distinct from their parents, but whether it's their genetic code or the environment that their parents constructed for them that shapes their being and their existence, there is some kind of intrinsic tie. They are distinct, but they're not entirely separable. We can understand this as the same kind of connection with us and our technology. Within our technologies, which are in a way distinct from us, we embed humanity within them. Because they are our creations, we transpose this human element into them, no matter how much we may deny that that connection exists. We may call it non-human, but it still bears elements of humanity. So when we think about the singularity and the four proposed routes towards the singularity, whether it's a human-machine hybrid or a computer network, an AI that transcends human intelligence, or our biologically engineered descendants, all of them will possess the mark of humanity. The human element will be present within all of them. So in a sense, it's kind of impossible to imagine a non-human future, because what is human? Where do you draw the line of the human element? And so, great. So a network of computers is just as human as me. Humanity is evil and life is meaningless, huh? Well, no. The human element goes as far as you want to project it. You can project the human element into the future, however helps you sleep at night, but the connections to humanity cannot be removed, like from a parent to a child. So when you think of the future, and in your visions of the future, you can humanize it to the extent that you want. Humanity is both good and evil. This is all a very extended metaphor just to show that it's all a matter of perspective. As for meaning, intrinsically for you, there is none. But the key point is that it's entirely up to you. From this point, we are here. We are right in the middle. We're in this gray area, and it's hard to do anything with this kind of perspective of recognizing, okay, it's all a matter of my perspective. It's all subjective. Cool. What do you even do with that? And oftentimes when you interact with philosophical material that really boils down to these kinds of ideas, what do you do with it? It kind of just makes you uncomfortable. And it's hard to envision the future when you have this very all-encompassing headspace. You need momentum and you need direction. So where do you go from here? Well, okay, since we can't go forward into envisioning the human future, let's just completely blindside everything else, and let's imagine what that human future might look like, according to my subjective opinion, and let's move back towards that middle. So why does humanity deserve to have a future? Well, because this is humanity. Humanity has great capacity for good. We share experiences with one another. We feel love. We show compassion to creatures that aren't of our own species. We can put conflict aside for even a brief moment just to share moments together. And we can also create great pieces of art and culture that can uplift the spirits of others. That's why I included a nice picture of the mural that's at the Stollery Hospital, painted by volunteers. So that's humanity, and the human experience is beautiful. So is life still meaningless? Do I have meaning in this lens? If we ask some more spiritualist philosophers, they would still say intrinsically for you, there is none, but only rationally. It doesn't change how you feel about it. And feeling is a very important point here. You can derive so much meaning out of the feelings that you yourself feel, but also the idea of instilling feelings in others. Feeling is very rarely isolated to self, and therefore when we think about a human future, we can think about a future centered around meaningful feelings. How can I uplift the human experience of others? How can I use my subjective understanding of what feels good and what a good life is? And how can I share that with others? And the human experience, going by how you feel, can be constructed. All of it is constructed anyways, so you can construct notions of what it means to raise the human experience. You can build a future that elevates the human experience, and you can construct a future with humanity, with the human experience. And you're always going to have people who feel contrary to your feelings. They will call you names. They will try and tear down your idea of what uplifting the human experience means. They will call you a colonizer. They will call you a mechano-fascist. They'll invent new words just to tear down your idea of the future. So you have to find a way to navigate that, understanding that it is a matter of perspective, but you have to go somewhere with it. So why not take your perspective, your experience, and use it to uplift the experiences of others? But, key asterisk, doesn't the singularity threaten the human experience? Doesn't it imply the eradication of humanity? Not really. It's all a matter of perspective again. We can think of scenarios in which the singularity doesn't mean the removal of the human experience as we know it today. An example could be an AI shepherd. If we construct this AI and it takes over hegemony over the world, it might look at us with compassion in the same way that we would look at our pets, for example. Perhaps it'll want to foster the human experience and ensure that we can live fulfilling lives that are detached from the busyness of life that we understand today. As well, there are more abstract understandings of how the human experience can be preserved in the future. If we were, for example, to upload our consciousnesses, then if, let's say, you could simulate all infinite universes in which you are a conscious entity that is unaware of its omniscience, you could project yourself into those realities and live out those lived experiences completely unaware of anything higher. You will live that human experience authentically, and you can do it infinitely. Isn't that the preservation of the human experience as we know it? In any case, the singularity has great possibility to alter the human experience as we know it, but it would at least be a far more familiar to life as we now know it compared to, let's say, outright extermination. So it's really up to you. What do you want the human future to be? It's for you to determine, but don't forget the human element, and you define where that is. It's there no matter how hard you try. So going back to that essential question that started this whole philosophical discussion of what even is the human versus non-human future, well, it's a spectrum. It's all of it. It's the whole spectrum. And you label the poles. You settle on the boundaries. You just can't get stuck motionless in the middle. You have to pick whatever area you want of it and act towards the future that you want to build. It's not enough to simply discuss and think about it, because you can end up lost in the middle and going nowhere. So if you want a more human future, then settle on what that means. And it will change over time, but you at least have to be certain about it, and you have to act towards it and move towards it. Oh, and don't mind the singularity. It'll happen whether you like it or not. And here's my resources.
Yeah, so you turn off your mic and yeah, we'll turn these on. Okay. Tasmin, yes. Yeah.
All right. So do you think that in the future, an artificial intelligence will have the same sort of existential crises that a human does? Because
It's very possible. But the thing is, this is a point that I kind of didn't have time to weave into my argument, but we'll have absolutely no way of understanding what its conscious experience is like. That's why we're so attached to the human experience, is because we understand it. You can never understand the experience of another fundamentally, but thinking about this super intelligence that's far beyond us, we can't even fathom what its experience would be like. Maybe it solves the existential question. We'll have no way of knowing. But to us, it's very scary.
Yeah.
I guess this is more about the presentation itself, but where would you say you fall on the spectrum that you outlined?
I definitely fall more towards the light end of the spectrum. And for me, a human future is definitely just a preservation of the human experience as we know it. It'll be completely out of our control, and that's important to recognize. But we can build towards a more human future. Up until that point, we can use our technologies right now to uplift the human experience up until this super intelligence comes about. But really, I'd really like to hope that whatever comes about as a result of the singularity will either be not concerned with us at all, so that we can just go about what we were doing anyways, or that it will help uplift our experience of the human experience as a whole, if that makes sense.
So there must be some value in kind of a rich culture, right? Now, what do we mean by that? So you would imagine it's some traditional things that have been there and some new stuff and all sort of, wonderful ways synthesized together, right? But then what about your ability to control your surroundings, right? You can say, well, yeah, but what if that's absolute, right? You can make your surroundings anything that you want. You can make your, emotions anything that you want. Is that like ideal, or is that like a terrible future, right? That like, if everything's possible in terms of your surroundings, how do surroundings and have meaning then? Like, how do you have the feeling of accomplishment or having attained something if you can just dial anything you want up, right? So what about mixing those? I mean, it seems to me you probably wouldn't want one or the other. Like, it's nice to have traditions and old stuff and kind of consistency of that moving towards something new. It's also nice to have brand new things, like feelings that no human has ever felt before. You're now feeling like a whole new emotion or something, right? So to be able to somehow define a life that would contain both things that are different enough from your current reality that it's never been possible to have something that different before, and also things that are a sort of consistent organic connection with the past to the present and the future, right? and to have it feel satisfying somehow, right? Even though maybe you can control exactly how you feel, right? So yeah, and then if you're the first person to experience this new way of being, I think the biggest question is, why should anybody believe you, right? Because the bias would be tremendous. How did you get picked to be the first person to say you're the first person to try out mind uploading, right? So now you're living in a ceramic slab, right? So, and the rest of the human race is saying, well, how is it, you know? Don't you think that somehow, through some mechanism, the pressure for you to say it's fantastic is just going to be overwhelming, right? The people who chose you, who funded the experience, you know, they're all counting on you saying that it's the greatest thing ever, right? So nobody can believe Sean Liss, right?
What if the experience is so overwhelming though that I'm not even concerned about those people anymore? I'm
Right,
completely
right,
detached
right.
from the physical world because it's so amazing to have this higher experience.
Yeah, yeah. That no, that would maybe be the best answer. That yeah, you had all these prepared speeches and so on. You throw them away. This is so great. I sorry guys, I just want to experience this. You know, I'm not gonna like grade it on a scale of 1 to 100. It's no, it just, you know, beyond you know, imagining. The only way for you to know what it's like is follow me here and see, you know? Yeah. So, yeah. Well, the cool thing is, of course, there's a video of my 7-year-old granddaughter, you know, reacting to these things about based on, you know, video games that she's played and so on. Whether she thinks it would be desirable, because the predicted time at which Ray Kurzweil said that mind uploading would be successful and widespread is such that she would never, as a biological being, be 27 years old. At approximately 26, she would obviously opt to become completely digital in the ceramic slab. So all these great, you know, quotations from creative people at the age of 27 just would never happen, because she'd be in a whole different reality, you know. So anyway. So, you know, the Faculty of Medicine has, I think, either weekly or monthly, they pick, you know, remarkable things to kind of report, right? And the person whose job that is encountered this video of my 7-year-old granddaughter and me talking about mind uploading, and inappropriately thought that, you know, this should be shared across the whole family. It's like some gigantic accomplishment, but just because it's such a unique video. But anyway, we didn't do that, I'm happy to say. It's sort of mixing something that seems like a very watchable video, but is not, you know, some huge accomplishment. Just, you know, surprising. Yeah. So other questions, comments? Well, I think this has been a very good session. Let me say my my sort of default would be to simply pick a point in each of your videos and just give you then, or you know, provide probably the world with a video that is just you. But I do want you to have some time to sort of think about that, of exactly how it should be edited, and it obviously takes us more time. If you're talking about a kind of editing that I can't easily do myself, then it would take longer, but it's still possible. Yeah, so just think about it. And like some of the best videos in the course, that I've passed on to you. When you ask for exemplary presentations, I often give you Vanessa Rogers from, I think, 2012, or maybe, 2013. Yeah. She's now a practicing physician and so on. But that's an edited video, that we had all sorts of, we had enormous technical problems. We just cut all the technical problems out and stitched the rest of it together. Yeah, and done in a way that you can't really tell, and so on. So anyway, all that's possible, but I think people might like just the natural video of what actually happened to you when you gave your talk here, right, rather than the sort of one in which everything's fixed. Should we have an abstract with our paper? In the past, there have never been abstracts, but if you can think of a reason that there should be abstracts in the future, boy, we can make it mandatory, because Tasmin in 2021 suggested that we now require everybody to have an abstract of their paper. Absolutely. Yeah. So no, that's not a requirement at all, but yeah, we could think about that as a future advance, So, yeah, any other questions? Okay, so I think that's it for today. And we're only 6 minutes over. Man, I tell you, what a perfect day, eh? Okay, so that's it. Thank you.